What's the link between software and your health? Hi, my name is Oded, and in this podcast I'll talk about software development in the field of medical device, pharmaceutical, and healthcare with industry-leading experts. Today we will be taking a closer look into the variety of regulatory compliance solutions with the help of Dr. Marion Lepmets. Hi Marion, it's great to have you on the podcast. Thank you very much for participating. In this podcast, we discussed software development life cycles and medical device regulation. Maybe you can start by sharing your expertise in the field and how do you see the link between the two?
Sure. Thank you for inviting me to your podcast, Oded. It is a great pleasure to join you in this episode and to discuss a little bit about medical device companies and how they can automate their compliance. But I'm Marion, and I'm a co-founder and CEO of SoftComply, a company that provides compliance apps on Atlassian, Jira, and Confluence for medical device manufacturers and other product developers in the regulated industries. And our goal was when we started out, our goal was to help medical device startups to speed up regulatory compliance so that they can bring their innovative devices and products to market faster and much cheaper. And throughout the current COVID pandemic, we have offered our apps also for free to companies that are developing the test kits and ventilators and PPEs. And we have now been on the market for over 5 years, and we have about 600 client companies around the world, ranging from Fortune 100s to small startups, as we are the price leader in the regulatory compliance solution world. And primarily, we are providing automation for regulatory compliance to medical device manufacturers, and specifically for software and medical device developers. But there are also a lot of wellness app developers out there who are turning to us for support. And obviously, the wellness apps are intended to be used for general health and healthy lifestyle primarily. And they present minimal risk to the safety of their users. So these wellness devices would be, for example, the fitness trackers that everybody is using these days. And these would then track your fitness and your lifestyle rather than your medical condition. Also, exercise equipment would be another example for wellness devices, video games for exercises. But what is the kind of the difference between medical devices and wellness apps is that wellness apps do not need to be compliant with medical device regulations to reach the market. On the other hand, of course, the market is extremely competitive. And this is one of the reasons why a lot of wellness apps or wellness app developers are moving into the medical device market at the moment to become the so-called prescription apps by the doctors. And if they show that they have been developed following the best practices of medical device development and that they comply to the same set of regulatory requirements that as medical devices, they can therefore be also trusted by the doctors to be referred to and used by the patients. But medical devices, on the other hand, need to be regulated, of course, because they are intended to be used to diagnose, treat, mitigate, or prevent medical conditions. And these medical devices can vary a lot. So you have tongue depressors, and you have also complex devices like surgical lasers or pacemakers that are implanted into the patient. So medical devices they need to be demonstrated that they are safe to use, and for that they need to comply to regulations beforehand. In the US, these regulations are provided by the FDA, and in the EU, the regulation is specified by the medical device regulations from the European Commission.
I try to imagine that those guys that developed the wellness software, they decided they want to go to become regulated and be able to get reimbursement. And I would like to see their faces when they understand what they're facing with respect to all this regulation. How do you experience that?
Yeah, I mean, they vary, of course. Some of them are well aware of what the regulations are, and some are overwhelmed and decide to stay in the kind of the wellness and health area, of course. And it, of course, depends a lot of their funding as well, because regulations is a costly, it is a costly area. So the decision of whether they stay in the wellness domain or in the medical domain is a huge business decision for them to make. On the one hand, you don't need to comply with regulations, but you need to face the very tough competition in this wellness and health domain On the other hand, if you comply with regulation, you will become a medical device and therefore need to have more responsibility for the safety of the patients, but can potentially get to raise the prices as well.
And maybe taking that a bit further, I mean, where do you see the borderline between, let's say, a regulatory professional and a software developer that work in this field? What is the knowledge that are they completely separated? The developer can be focused only on software development, and the regulatory personnel for that specifically for that software as a medical device, can he be focused only on reading the guidelines? And how do you make software is not relevant to him? How do you see it?
Yeah, I think the verticals are not there that might have been there before. So I think that with more and more software in medical devices, and with software having the safety critical functionality in the increasing amount of medical devices today, not to mention the huge increase in software only devices, so the software as a medical device that you mentioned, I believe that software developers are ultimately the ones who are developing safe software products these days. So instead of having separate verticals for software development and safety and compliance, I believe the software development and the QA RA teams should actually be increasingly more integrated, because it is first and foremost the software developers who nowadays analyze the device safety risks and find the most effective ways to control them. So, I mean, there is no other way to do the safety by design, I believe. And regulatory compliance should therefore be also integrated into the software development toolset that developers are already using in their organizations, and quality management should not be left to another standalone tool in the organization used only by the quality and regulatory people or departments.
Right, you are emphasizing also the impact of the tools on that behavior, the business behavior in the company. Maybe you can describe the different types of regulatory compliance tools or solutions?
Absolutely. I mean, nowadays everybody is trying to automate their work. So there is obviously the different type of solutions also to automate regulatory compliance for medical device companies. But it's a hard task to really categorize them. But I guess to oversimplify maybe the types of tools that are out there, we could perhaps say that there are three different types of them. So you would first have the all-in-one solutions that are built from the regulatory compliance viewpoint. Then next you would have probably the regulatory compliance solutions that are pre-configured compliance solutions that integrate with an existing DevOps environment. And lastly, you would have the niche compliance apps that automate one specific regulatory compliance aspect at a time. And these are also built on top of an existing technology stack. So largely three kind of groups.
Okay, and if you could briefly maybe discuss the pros and cons of each, what we need to consider when thinking about them?
Sure. So for the all-in-one standalone solutions, I guess the biggest challenges would be their rather limited functionality, perhaps for the software developers, and they're usually quite steep price. These two providers, I believe, are seeing are differentiating between the product development and the QA/RA departments, seeing them as separate verticals. And this type of approach might work best in hardware companies, and maybe not so much in the software as a medical device or purely software devices. On the other hand, they of course will provide you with good compliance. For the compliance solutions and the niche compliance apps that are developed on an already existing technology stack, the price is obviously much lower for them. And because they are already built on top of an already existing platform, they are quite popular among software developers because they are already used by them. So they are very often introduced to the organization not by the QA/RA people, but by the software developers who carry these software tools with them as they move from company to company. But these compliance solutions and the compliant niche apps that are built on the existing technology stacks differ from each other. Obviously from the point of view of how the platforms themselves are different and the features that they have. but they also differ from each other probably on the level of granularity. So in case you do not have an internal quality manager, let's say, in your software company, you might feel more comfortable having a pre-configured all-in-one solution on the platform that you're already using for development. But if you have a QA person who, together with your software development team, wants to be in full control over the compliance tools, you should probably look into the niche compliance apps rather than a pre-configured solution, because the niche compliance apps provide the users with all the configuration power. So the users can set up their processes exactly the way they want to and the way they have the processes already in the organization. In other words, the difference between, I think, the compliance solutions and the compliance apps offered is how much configuration is left to the end user. But of course, both developers of the compliance solutions on the existing stack provide the know-how to the users about how to set up the processes in organizations compliantly, and obviously the most important part of how to keep this compliance when the organizations are growing and perhaps when they want to change the configuration of that platform that they are using. So there is usually a wide range of those technologies out there. And if I was to bring an example, then for example Atlassian, which is quite a large developer of ALM with tools like Jira and Confluence, they have a marketplace of over 5,000 apps at the moment. And these 5,000 apps are automating various processes in an organization, including their apps for compliance for regulated industries. And these tools like Jira and Confluence, they have built-in integration already between themselves, so that the companies who are using these tools have possibilities to build, for example, traceability matrices, without having to have any separate solution for it. So the different platforms and technology stacks are very strong by themselves already.
Can you give us a real-life example of a company using Atlassian?
Sure, yep. So Atlassian, like I mentioned, has a lot of different tools and obviously a marketplace full of apps on it to automate various processes. And probably the most well-known tools from Atlassian are Jira and Confluence. So Jira is the issue tracking tool used a lot in kind of managing your software development work. And Confluence is more where you keep your documentation or an internal wiki in the organization. And of course you have code repository and CI in there as well. And everything in Atlassian tools is then tied to each other, so you can link easily your Jira issues or your work, your backlog, your tickets to your documentation, your code repository. And for example, if we look at a software development company, you would keep your requirement specification in Confluence, but you could have your user needs and requirements specified also as Jira issues. You can link them to each other. You can then have your, for example, medical device, in the medical device world, you could have your risks in a separate Jira app for risk management. And these are also tied to your requirements in Jira, because a lot of times your risk controls, for example, or mitigation actions would be another piece of either a software item or another piece of software that you can then tie to your risks by linking it to another Jira requirement, a Jira issue as a requirement. And then on the verification side, for example, you could have test cases linked to that one particular risk. And the Jira issue, the requirement that you brought out as a mitigation action to see that, for example, that particular mitigation action is really efficient to mitigate the risk. And for test management, there is also, I think, about 5-6 different widely used apps on Jira that can be used. And in the end, what you can then do is that you have reports that you can have in Confluence then, where your documents are kept. And in Confluence, you would also have document approval, workflows, e-signatures, things that you need to, for example, your quality management system. So all of this world of Atlassian tools themselves, plus the apps that are on it, can provide you the full set of compliance solution with a very strong underlying set of features for software development.
Right. So I know the answer for that is it depends, but still, how can you choose the right tool? I mean, what would you advise when coming to those vendors? What do you advise companies to ask or to consider?
Yeah, it's a good question, because I mean this is something that I believe a lot of medical device companies are struggling with, or finding the best product that most importantly that a product that fits the needs of that company, right? So I guess first, especially a software company, I would say that get both your software developers and your QA/RA people involved in that process of choosing the right products. And if your device has any software in it, it is important that the developers are happy with the tool. It's very hard to have their buy-in if the developers are not happy with it. So they just leave the tool to the QA/RA people then. So the first thing maybe to have is, of course, have a live demo of the tool, or several of demos that involve all the people who are going to use it. Ideally, it is probably good to have the demos of different solutions and tools that you are considering in the same or subsequent weeks to be able to really compare them well to each other. And you should also be able to have a free trial of the solution or tool in-house, because this is ultimately the best way to make sure that everyone who will be using the tool is actually happy with it. And any questions or wishes that you have during this trial should be addressed in either another live demo, or you could try out the support services of that tool vendor. So you could contact the tool developers by whatever support channel that they offer. And this way you can actually also test out how quickly the support team is taking care of your problems or requests. Another important thing is to have a full transparency of the pricing, because you don't really want to buy a solution that once you have already decided to buy it, you find out that there are some hidden figures somewhere that you didn't really consider at the start. And as I mentioned, the support that the vendors offer after the purchase is extremely important. And this is something that is evident, of course, from the customer reviews as well as published SLAs. And maybe onboarding training as well. So once you have decided for the tool that you have either subscribed to or purchased, that you have a chance to get everybody who is going to use that tool quickly acquainted with all the features of that product. And this is the best thing to do, is to have an onboarding training for that. So I would say demo, trial, have a transparent pricing and know at least all the details about the pricing, support after the purchase, and onboarding training.
Maybe you can tell us a bit how can people follow your publications or get more information about the solutions you provide?
Sure. So you can read about us either on our website. So we are at softcomply.com. And we are also on Atlassian Marketplace. So if you're using Jira or Confluence, then you are probably also looking for different apps that support your processes in the App Store, or Atlassian Marketplace, as it is called in Atlassian world. And you would find us with looking for SoftComply or medical devices. We have 3 apps at the moment, and developing additional ones to support medical device companies in compliance. We have 2 risk management apps to help companies with automating their hazard analysis, as well as FMEA. And we have a quality management system app that provides particularly startup companies with a lot of content that is required for complying with the FDA regulations and with EU regulations. So they are based on FDA 21, CFRA 20, and ISO 13485, ISO 14971, and IEC 62304. So particularly for companies who are using or developing software as a medical device, this is a perfect solution, as you can tie it into into your ALM, if you're using Jira for requirements management, you're using other apps on Atlassian for test management, then everything ties together perfectly, and you can have your traceability matrices ready when the auditors need it.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Oded, and great being in your podcast.